Hello everyone. First, I wanted to thank you for being all there today at Mobile Optimize because we are going to talk about Android Things, which is a new vertical Android that sits alongside Android for phones and tablets, Wear, TV, and Auto. And this new extension of Android is optimized for IoT, Internet of Things devices, which means that we, Android developers, can now easily make smart devices that have direct physical interactions to the real world. Our applications are no longer locked inside a phone screen. If you can build an app, now you can build a device. And Android Things is particularly good for devices that require a good amount of computation power, such as security cameras or smart doorbells, for instance. Devices that can do computation locally, and devices that may require some image processing without having to consistently ask for the network to do some process and then have the results. Android Things also works well for devices that aggregate a lot of data from multiple sensors for further processing. But you're not limited to that. You're not limited to that list. You can do crazy things, such as your own 8-bit distributed piano, for example, to play a Sia's song. We have no music here, but there is no sound. But you can play a piano, for instance. If you prefer to play music like a scientist, you can use a capacity touch sensor and play music when pressing some beer cans, just using capacitive sensors. And if you're into cute stuff, you can build a Lucky Cat that moves its paw every time you receive a notification on your phone. The Lucky Cat is connected to Bluetooth Ali. And this is very easy to do. And last example, if you like chocolates, you can create a robot that gives you chocolate bars, a robot powered by the Google Assistant, and can tell you some jokes and gives you chocolate bars. The Google Assistant is an artificial intelligence technology inside the Google Home device, and you can actually embed that exact same technology in any of your Android Things projects. So not only that, but you can also extend this technology to your own custom needs. In that case, when I say, give me a chocolate bar, it gives me some chocolate. You can make all those projects with Android Things in less than a day each. I will share a link to the slide at the end of the talk, so you will later be able to go to every link and have more information about the source code or how it's made and make a better project yourself. Take some inspiration from all those projects and create better projects yourself. What I personally like the most about Android Things is first that it uses the Android SDK. So if you know how to create apps for Android, you know how to create apps for Android Things. You can, if you want, use RxJava, Kotlin, Retrofit, the architecture component to create an app for Android Things, to create a device. If you want to test your IoT project, you can just use JUnit, Mockito. You actually use the same great tools you are already used to when doing some Android development. So it's really easy to prototype. You can also use all Google services if you want. For example, let's say that you need some push notification. Just integrate Firebase Cloud Messaging as you would normally do in any mobile app, and in a few minutes later, you're done. You have an additional support library with Android Things that lets you communicate with custom components, custom hardware components, such as LEDs, sensors, actuators, or push buttons, all those components. And finally, with Android Things, you can publish updates really easily. It's Google. It's the same way you publish updates to mobile devices. Google gives you a developer console for that, and you are only in charge of developing the software part. So you just develop applications. All the infrastructure, all the hardware, operating system is managed by Google. What does it mean? Simply, if there is any security updates for Android, Google will publish those security updates instantly. So every devices with Android Things will be always up to date. It will be very secured. And you know, security is always one of the biggest issues with IoT devices, and it's not really one with Android Things. Another thing, imagine that you bought an actual Android Things device, but the manufacturer does not support this device anymore. That's no problem. Google will still publish regularly security updates. Here is a list of compatible boards so far if you want to get started and install Android things. You install Android things the same way you would install a GNU over Linux distro. If you want to get started, I suggest you to use a Raspberry Pi 3 for two reasons. First, because it's affordable, and then because it has a huge community behind. So let's say you tried Android things, but you don't plan to create any projects yet. It's not a problem, just reuse your RPi for other projects. You will always find something to do with your RPi, so it won't really be a waste of money to buy one just for Android things. Plus, you will experiment and learn new things, and that's always valuable. So Android things makes prototyping device very, very easy, but it's not limited to that. You can also transform those prototypes and make those prototypes production devices easily. It's one of the other goals of Android things. And for that, Google encourages you to use boards with SOM or system on module, such as this one, the NXP MX7D. So as you can see, this board is actually composed of two boards stacked on top of each other. The top smaller board is a core compute module that contains everything you need to run Android on that. So it contains a CPU, memory, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, everything. And the base board that's underneath will just give you a lot of connections to LEDs, sensors, and USB power. What it means is that simply it simplifies production hardware a lot. Another advantage, when you ship a product, you need to pass a lot of certifications, like when a device enters the market, it has to be certified for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and everything. If you use a system on module, a small chip, those system on module compatible with Android things are already pre-certified. So you will not go through the testing process again. It will save you a lot of time and money. This is an example of what you can do. Guys at Google bought an Intel Edison board. They just took the SOM. They created their own hardware device. We can see on the right that has two LEDs and a USB for power. So if you're planning a lot of production hardware, just use Android things, install your app on the SOM, and just create smaller boards that only has the components you need. It will save you a lot of time and money. Of course, you are not forced to create another board. If you are just a maker and you want to try to do some projects with Android things, just use the RPi and that's good enough. You don't have to do that. But if you are shipping a lot of products, you will want to do something like that. Okay, so now once you bought a board, what you should do to get started with Android things. If you're new to electronics, I suggest you to first buy an Arduino and if possible an Arduino starter kit, as you will directly have a microcontroller, some sensors, LEDs, resistors, push buttons, and a solderless prototyping board. Those kits come with instructions to tell you how to get started with electronics, and you will have some code samples. So if you're completely new to electronics, and it was my case a few months ago, just buy that, and you will learn very quickly what you need to get started with Android things. And once you're familiar with all those components, just integrate those in your Android things project easily. The first time you take a look at the Raspberry Pi 3, you will be maybe a little scared because it has a lot of pins with a lot of different things written on it, and you don't really know what it is. It's a lot of unfamiliar terms for us, such as GPIO, PWM, I2C, and others. Those are just ways to interact with the peripheral. When you buy a component, it's usually specified how you can interact with it. For instance, if you want to buy this LED screen, it tells you that you need to use I2C to communicate with it. So you will directly know where to plug it on your development board. The Android Things support library contains specific APIs to communicate with all those different devices, GPIO, PWM. And let's start with the first one, GPIO. GPIO is a very simple way to communicate, to interact with a component. In any of the GPIO pins, you can connect a GPIO-compatible peripheral, such as an LED or a simple sensor. And today we will connect an LED, for example, and we will connect it to the first GPIO pin available, which is BCM4. So we connect our pin to BCM4. We just add a resistor to limit the current, otherwise the LED will get too much current and completely burn out. And we need to always close a circuit. So one side of the LED should be connected to BCM4, and the other side will be connected to ground, which is equals to 0 volt. To programmatically, so we connected our LED, and now we want to control it. So you will use Android Things specific APIs, and first thing you need to do is to create an instance of a peripheral manager service. This class will give you objects for those components. So here you will just use your peripheral manager service, and you will open the GPIO named BCM4, and that way, in one line, you will get a reference to your LED device. You also have to set the direction, because an LED is an output device, means data comes from the Raspberry Pi to the outside world if you want to turn on an LED. An input device could be, for example, a button, because it's events from the outside world into the Raspberry Pi. Or like a keyboard. A keyboard is like an input device. Okay, now we have our LED. How do we do to turn it on? It's very simple. If you understand Booleans, you know how to understand GPIO, because it's exactly the same thing. To turn it on, you just set the LED value to true. You provide current to the LED. And once you provide current to the LED, it will be on forever. If you want to turn it off, you just set the value to false. If you want to have an LED that blinks every second, you just while true. You set the LED value to the opposite value, and you wait for 1 second in a different thread. So if you want to make an LED blink with Android Things, which will be your first try, you will see it's very, very easy. So far, we only saw GPIO, but there are other communication interfaces. PWM, with PWM, you don't set a Boolean, you don't set a true-false value, but you will set a value in a given range. It's useful to manipulate components such as this servo motor, for example, because I want to move my servo to a specific angle from 0 to 180 degrees. And I don't want just to set it to 0 or to 180 degrees. I want to set a value at a given range. So here from 45 degrees to 90 degrees. What I could do is use 180 booleans for that, but you don't want to do that. And good news, PWM is exactly made for that. I2C is a serial synchronous protocol that lets you connect up to 127 peripherals at a low transfer speed. It's a 2 wires protocol. You have 1 line for data and 1 line for the clock to synchronize data exchange. You can connect using I2C small sensors, for example, this LED screen, for example, if you want to create a maze game or something else, if you want to write a text on it, just a very small screen under $5. SPI is another serial interface like I2C, but much faster and can connect unlimited number of peripherals, but it needs more wires. You can connect an NFC module, for instance, if you want to use your Amiibos in existing in your Android Things projects. I2S is for audio devices, and it's actually used by Google's voice kits to connect audio devices. And UART is to connect device at a medium transfer speed. So it's asynchronous protocol, and you need 2 lines, one to transmit data and one to receive data. And of course, clock speed should be the same. So here you see you have a line for transmit, you have a line for receive, and you don't have a line for clock, because both devices should agree programmatically on the clock on which speed they will send data. You can also use USB with Android Things. So if you have a device and this device is not supported by Android Things, just connect this device to an Arduino, connect the Arduino directly to the USB of the Raspberry Pi, and directly you can use any device you want. It's very good because the Arduino is a real-time operating system. Sometimes you have some sensors that need a real-time operating system to work. Android is not one, so just connect your specific sensor to the Arduino, and then connect your Arduino to the Raspberry Pi, and you will be done very easily via USB. So check out the official documentation if you want more information about all those ways to interact with peripherals. Just one thing, there are a lot of different ways, I2C, SPI, but it's always basically the same thing. It's always about writing byte arrays and reading byte arrays from and to devices. So you have a lot of different ways, but you will see it's very easy to communicate to a device once you read the documentation. Now that you're familiar with GPIOs, we will build a very fast remote control car. For that, you either need to buy a chassis kit with DC motors. It costs around $10. Or you can steal your son's favorite toys, cut some lines, and usually in those kind of toys, you already have DC motors. So just cut the line, and you will have already your DC motors. But how to move DC motors? For that, you can buy a module, like this module. Modules are like interfaces, are like, let's say, modules are like code libraries. It's a lot of complex stuff gathered together, but accessible via a very simple contract. So to control a very complex thing like a car with two DC motors and everything, with a module, it will give you an API, and to make a car move, you actually have to set values to 4 different booleans, to 4 different GPIO. So if you want to move the left wheel forward, you use this module, and you simply set GPIO 1 to true, and it will directly move the left wheel forward. GPIO 2, when you set GPIO 2 to true, it will move the left wheel backward. GPIO 3 and 4 will move the right wheel forward and backward. So it's a very simple interface, just 4 GPIOs to control a car. Another module that is very good is a relay module. It lets you control high voltage devices with a Boolean value true false with GPIO. For example, if you want to turn on a fan programmatically or a heater or everything, just buy a very small relay module, and then you can just turn on a fan, turn off a fan, very easy with GPIO.value equals true or false. Okay, let's open Android Studio 3 and create a new project for Android Things. So when you download Android Studio 3, you can directly find new project and select Android Things. And it will directly add a dependency specific to Android Things, which is currently version 0.4.1. And it will add some metadata in the manifest. As you can see, an Android Things project is like an Android project. It has application and activities. You need at least one activity for an Android Things project. And this activity has an intent filter, which is IoT launcher, which means that the Android Things launcher will automatically start this activity when the device boots. Android Studio also generates a simple activity file when you create a new project. You can see it's something you already know. Notice here the setContentView call. An Android Things device may or may not have a screen. It's up to you. If you are building a paper-like robot like this one, you will need a screen, and you can just inflate your XML layouts and use your views the same way you are used to with Android, and views will be automatically displayed on the screen. But if you're building a Roomba-like robot, you don't need a screen. So you will not have setContentView, but you will still need an activity, because Android Things is Android. So you will still need an activity, but you will just not deal with layouts. What you can do, for example, is you can provide a text user interface using text-to-speech or others to communicate to the device. But you may not want to add a screen to that device. So you will still need an activity, because it's Android. You will write everything in an activity, but you will not inflate your views. So back to our activity, you just write this simple code. If you want to move forward, you set GPIO 1 and 3 to true. So both wheels will move forward, and the car will move. And if you want to add remote control to the car, just use the normal APIs you are used to with Android. So you just use Bluetooth LE or the Nearby Connections API. You can also embed an HTTP server inside your Android Things project. Do whatever you want. As you see so far, to manipulate components, you manipulate your components like you move your car forward at Java, Kotlin, or GNI space. So you are not writing kernel space drivers, but to create a library to simplify using a component, it's as easy as creating a standard Android library. So it's very, very easy. All those drivers for all those components are already available with Android Things. So you can just use all those components, integrate them in your build.gradle the same way you will integrate any other dependency, and you will be able to access those components easily, because those drivers will provide easy interfaces to interact with those components. And if there is no driver for a component, just write it yourself. And if you are too lazy to write it yourself, just take an Arduino code and port it to Android Things directly. Just take an Arduino driver and write the same into Java or Kotlin. So you have external drivers to make component work with Android Things, and you have something else called user space drivers. And a user space driver will inject hardware components directly into the Android system, and it's available for GPS, human interface devices, like a keyboard, sensors, and audio. What it means is that if you bought a GPS via UART, you will write a driver for it. But what you want, actually, is the Android framework to provide GPS event. The Android framework should communicate to your device to provide events directly. So you can use directly the Fuse Location Manager, and Android will directly call your own components. You can do that with user space drivers. An example here, if you bought this touchpad, and when you press a key, you want to receive events in the activities on key up and on key down. Like that, you would override on key up and key down. To do that, you simply have to create an input driver. You specify the key you want, like key code 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to star. You register your driver, and then you emit the key event to the framework. So you can really create a driver that emits hardware events to the framework directly, so that those events and that component will be available in every apps installed on the board. So when somebody will press, every app that overrides on key up, on key down will directly receive events from this custom device. And if you want to create a driver like that, it will take you 1 day if you don't know how to. So it's kind of fast. Okay. Now I've told you everything I know about Android things. Let's talk a little about our society. As you know, humans don't use their brains to its full capacity. We are distracted by media, entertainment, and politics. Also, border country lines lead to endless wars and conflicts. We know that. Reason for that? Reptilians, of course. If you have never heard about them, reptilians are aliens who are living in our planet, and they are controlling us since like thousands of years. Some people just don't believe in those lizard humanoid species. Others think, and they're right, that Illuminatis are controlling the world, and reptilians are actually controlling Illuminatis. Believe what you want. I mean, look around you. You have plenty of signs and evidences. Reptilians have altered our DNA, so we don't use our brain to its full capacity, making us easier to control. They control humans by distracting us with entertainment, media, and politics. And they created the law to restrict us. And they have, through the generations, ruled the world. And you can't tell it because they are shape-shifting. They take the appearance of humans like us. So you don't really know how to recognize a reptilian. And if there is one in front of you, what could you do? I mean, we are harmless. And it has been forever we were harmless like that. They were laughing at us. But now that Android thinks it's released, it's a different story. Here is how you can build a device that detects and exterminates those reptilians. As you know, humans are unable to detect reptilians, but artificial intelligence can. So we are going to use TensorFlow, which is an open source library for machine learning developed by Google and currently used in many of their projects like Maps, Search, YouTube, and many more. If you haven't tried it yet, I suggest you to follow those two code labs. They give you a great introduction of what TensorFlow is. We will use an existing neural network model named Inception 3. This model was trained to recognize objects inside millions of images. And what we will do, this model, Inception 3, is a neural network model that can recognize fruits, animals, but it's kind of useless to recognize fruits and animals. So what we will do is we will retrain it to detect humans from reptilians instead. And for that, first we need to go to Google, download a lot of images. So I download a lot of pictures of humans in a human folder, reptiles and reptilians. And I will provide all those images to TensorFlow. I retrain my model using an official TensorFlow script already in the GitHub repository, TensorFlow's GitHub repository. And this script will generate me two files, a protobuf file and a text file. Protobuf file will be a huge file that contains all our neural network model, and the labels file will just map those data into human readable values. So the labels file will contain 3 references: humans, reptiles, reptilians. And we will provide an image to TensorFlow. And when we provide an image, this one will tell us if it's a human, reptile, or reptilian. So I have launched my script, and then it generates me those files. I import those files into the official Android sample. TensorFlow provides already an official Android sample, so you can just import your model into it, and you can start it with your own model. If you're curious, very quickly, TensorFlow is working like that. So first you create an inference interface, but this code is already written in the Android app sample. Then you convert every time you want to recognize something, you take a picture, and then you convert this picture into pixels, an array of pixels, where you need to convert it into an array of pixels simply because TensorFlow was trained with an array of pixels, so you provide the same kind of data. You run the inference interface, and then TensorFlow, you fetch the result. So TensorFlow will generate an array of outputs. And for example, if you provide this image to TensorFlow, TensorFlow will fill the outputs array like that, and we tell you that this man is like 1% reptilian, 0% reptile, of course, and 99% human. So TensorFlow, you provide an image, and it will tell you this man is a real human. Okay, so now we will try with random data. So I download pictures on internet, I download the same human, I download a random reptile, a random reptilian, a random human, and Obama photoshopped as a reptilian, don't ask me why. So we will try the code sample. With our camera, we will show the picture of the random human. We can see on the top, TensorFlow tells me it's like 98% human. So this man is harmless, no problem about that. Here, we show this picture to TensorFlow, it tells us 99% of chances that this person is a reptile. This is 96% of chances that it's a reptilian. This is actually funny because I don't know this man. I found on internet, and TensorFlow tells me it's 99% of chances it's a reptilian. So if you see this man, just run away. I don't know this man. Obama photoshopped as a reptilian is obviously a reptilian because it's photoshopped. And this man, if you know him, it's maybe TensorFlow can tell us. Yeah, TensorFlow tells us that it's Jake Wharton. And big problem here, Jake Wharton is half reptilian, half Jake Wharton. So TensorFlow recognizes this person as Jake Wharton. And big problem here, because actually Jake Wharton is a crossbreed reptilian. And that could explain a lot of things, like why he's so much smarter than us. Because his brain is not limited. He can use his brain to its full capacity. And because he can do that, that's obvious. And thank you, TensorFlow, the truth was right in front of us like the whole time. If you wonder how I did that, of course I didn't create 3 different folders, human, reptile, reptilians, but I created 4 different folders, human, reptile, reptilians, and Jake Wharton. I provide all those images to TensorFlow, I train it, and then TensorFlow told me that this man was Jake Wharton. It can recognize faces very easily. And it's just like 2 scripts you have to run to start creating your own model. What you would like to create your own model? For example, here you can see it's a Japanese factory, Cucumbers factory, and they created a machine with TensorFlow to detect and sort cucumbers by size, colors, and shape and everything. And what you could do, for example, you could create hardware that detects broken pieces in a factory and automatically stops the production line as soon as one is detected, like fail fast. You can do that with TensorFlow very, very easily. To take picture, we will use a Raspberry Pi, a camera, and we will use a sonar sensor. This is a component you buy for like $1, and it sends sonars like bats or dolphins do to determine distance. And then the sound is propagated back to the device, and according to how long the sound went from one point to the other, you can determine the distance to objects. If you're interested to know how this sensor works, it has 2 lines, one for trigger and one for echo. Actually, you set the trigger GPIO to true for 10 microseconds. So you trigger GPIO set value equals true, thread.sleep 10 microseconds, and set value false. When you set current to the trigger, the component will start sending 8 acoustic bursts. It will start sending sonar signals. And when it starts sending sonar signals, it sets the echo value to true. So this is the official manual. And once it receives signals, it sets it to false. So what you have to do is when the echo value is set to true, you listen for changes, and then you save the date, the current time in a variable. And when the value is back to false, you just make a diff, and then you can know the distance. And it's really, really easy. You can wrap everything in a live data if you want. And your Android Things project will just observe. And if there is somebody in around 15 centimeter, you will take a picture of this person to recognize it. So we are creating a machine, and when somebody approach this machine, we will start taking a picture and then detect if it's a human or a reptilian. And if it's a reptilian, of course, we should kill him. I mean, I just forgot. If it's a reptilian, but it's not Jack Wharton, because we don't want to kill Jack Wharton. He made so many things for us. We just can't do that. How can we exterminate reptilians? So I found 3 possible ways. First, the flamethrower option. To create a flamethrower, it's very easy. You simply attach a servo to a flammable spray device, and you set the angle using PWM of this servo, and then it will move the angle, it will press the flammable spray. You just put a simple flame, and it will burn. I tried, but mine was not really impressive, so you can see other people did it. And if you want to do that, if you don't know, it will maybe take you 3 days, but you can just do that very, very easily. And there is another reason mine was not very impressive, is because I didn't want to kill myself stupidly. So just don't do that at home, kids. Flamethrower is just too dangerous. Let's use a gun instead. So, of course, you hide the gun inside the fake wall, otherwise people will notice there is a gun, they will not approach the machine, they will not be dead. They won't be dead. So, how to kill people with a gun using adrenaline things? You need a rope, a servo motor, and a gun. I use a plastic gun because in my country I'm not allowed to carry a gun, and that's better for me. You attach everything together, and simply you move the servo motor to the angle you want, and it will automatically press the trigger. It's that easy. You can kill somebody with a $1 servo motor very, very easily. So you arm the gun, and then when a reptilian is detected, you just kill him. You can do that in it took me not even 1 day to create something like that. And better, but because the gun is not very violent, you can use a chainsaw, and to use a chainsaw, here's the plan. So you can appreciate my game skills. So I took a chainsaw and I hid it inside a fake roof. And when a reptilian is detected, the chainsaw falls from the sky and kills the reptilian, and the reptilian is sad. So for that you need a LED strip, an LED strip. Why do you need an LED strip? Because it's pretty. And here it's what it looks like. It's much more impressive with sound, but you can just create a servo and just move it, and there is a big sound, and the reptilians are afraid. And how you do that? So it's an LED strip, and you just control it the way you want. And what I actually did this example is to show you that you can actually use the Android SDK to do something like that. You can just create value animators, so you can see the chainsaw is changing color every time. So I created a value animator that changes colors, that loops from all the color spectrum. And I added a listener to my value animator so that I can write on my LED strip the new color. And you notice that first it's very slow because you are starting the chainsaw, and then it's going very fast to kill people. To do that, again, you can just use a value animator with a custom path interpolator, the same way you would do on an Android project. So you create your custom path. So first my chainsaw is very slow, around 2 frames per second, and then very fast, 50 frames per second, and then very, very, very slow. Or you can, you have many ways to do it. But here I made this one, so I can show you that you actually use value animators, components from the Android SDK, to do your animations and to do something like that. And we are done. I mean, reptilians are our friend now. To conclude, Android Things is fun. It's really easy to get started with Android Things. You can create nice projects in only a few days. It really accelerates developing IoT projects. Reptilians suck, pardon my French. And just try Android Things, really. I mean, you will learn new things, and you will have fun. You will create fun projects or useful projects. You are a developer, now try to be a maker. That's all for me. You can follow me on Twitter. The slides are available here. Lecture was a little too fast. If you want to have more information, check out CodeSample and everything. You have footnotes on almost every slide. You can just take a picture of this slide, go to the link later, and then you can find more information about how to create those projects with Android Things. We may have very few minutes for questions. Otherwise, I will be around today, so feel free to ping me, and thank you for your attention.
Questions?
Are you one of them?
No, can't tell.
No?
No. But if I were one of them, I would not tell you either. Did I try the machine on me?
No.
No, I don't want to die.
Yourself.
Yes.
I think he's lying.
No, but the thing is that I cheated a little. I put one picture of Jack Wharton inside the reptilians folder. So reptilians can detect Jack Wharton, the TensorFlow can detect Jack Wharton as a reptilian. Because I cheated a little, because maybe he is, maybe he's not. I didn't want to know the real truth about that. So I cheated because I didn't want to know the truth about that.
So I have a question that's going to be a serious one, I'm afraid. So you said that there's lots of Android in there. Actually, there was lots of Android. So my question is, not sure if you are using, because they were like, I guess, quick hacks, but do you see like VM being used in Android Things projects, or MVP, or Viper, or even with testing? Do you really see like Mockito being used to mock device or data from a device? How do you see making like whole project with testing and architecture?
It's always good to separate responsibilities. So use the architecture you want to separate responsibilities. That's always good. If you separate responsibilities well enough, you can separate your components, like an LED, finally just a view. It's a different way to think of a view, but it's still a view. You can just create wrapper. And if you want to test unit in a unit test that the LED is on or off, just use Mockito, just use mocks for your real hardware components. So of course, it's always good to use exactly the same patterns you are familiar with Android. Use those on Android things to make your code base cleaner and testable.
Another one. So if I get it correctly, I don't need any C or C++ to play with Android things. Everything can be done in just good old Java or Kotlin. Java, Kotlin. If you like C++, you have a GNI interface. You can control the stuff using GNI too, if you like. But you can do everything in Java, Kotlin.
Anyone else want to ask? Yeah? Okay, yeah. Thank you for your presentation. It was cool. Really good. Yeah.